righty, we're back. Thanks for staying with us.
Back.
Planet Green Tree is 195.
We're front.
We're going to turn it right over here and get our next caller, and Ben Horner. Ben, thank you for
Hello.
Ben, thanks for calling in. Ben, of course, is stakeholder in the CSG group, and I understand that today there was some, this activity with the Senate, the committee hearing and the saliva tests. Care to share what you know about that, what it was all about? I think it's something that we just discussed with the other guest, and I take great interest in it in terms of its reliability. What can you report for us?
Well, I can. We had some a pretty good day on that issue. There was a House Judicial Hearing meeting at the Anderson Building at 9 a.m. They allowed some expert testimony from the state police, from the sponsor of the bill and prosecutor from St. Clair County, and they were, of course, supporting the bill and advocating for it. The state police explained that the saliva test was forward-thinking and that they admitted the technology wasn't, fully realized at this time to be able to pull out these tests with any real reliability, but they're hoping to be able to have the tools that they need. And, of course, the officer from the state police said that this was not, intended to go after medical marijuana patients, and then we got to hear some testimony from Robin Schneider and Rick Thompson and Eric Gunnels, and I testified as well. And I think there was a pretty general message that these saliva tests for medical marijuana patients is just unacceptable, and they're going to need to remove those from the bill because obviously all patients are going to have a minute amount of medical marijuana in them. There was also discussion about putting an exemption in for like they did in Colorado to prevent the fact that you have your card to be used as probable cause to initiate a search or a test, as well as we talked a little bit about potential standards for nanograms. I suggested 5 nanograms per liter of blood for non-patients and 8 nanograms active THC per liter for patients. And it seemed as though the committee was receptive to our messages. And afterwards, I called Mike Colton, who has co-sponsored this bill, and there's some confusion as to why, he would sponsor a bill like this, considering he's been such an advocate for medical marijuana patients. And, he explained that he did not realize that, medical marijuana was going to be an issue. Obviously, the state police and the sponsor of the bill are trying to, underplay that. And he called the bill sponsor, and he messaged us, and he thinks that he's going to be able to have the saliva test exemption for medical marijuana patients put in there. And,
hey, Ben, real quick here. Ben, MichiganRadio.org has a posting quoting Representative Lauer, and he says, and I quote, "I think we're going to see an amendment that would allow a medical marijuana user to produce their card if they were pulled over, and that would exempt them from the saliva test," quote. So you're absolutely correct in what you said, that was accomplished via the hearing from today. So I just wanted to back up that statement with the news report on that issue.
Excellent. Very good.
So let me ask you, if the debate was about whether or not patients would be subject to the test, and it seemed to have prevailed, how did the discussion get into any per se numbers? I'm just curious, where did that come from?
Well, I proposed that if you did not remove the saliva test for medical marijuana patients, that you should put some kind of standard in there because, just because, you have some active THC in your system doesn't mean that you're under the influence. I still think that kind of language should go in there. It's forward thinking. It's the standard in other states that are passed drug driving laws, and but I don't think they're ready to go there yet. And but I did hear from one of the staff's aides that they did like the concept of the 5 nanogram limit, and they were going to review that as well.
I mean, when you say 5 nanograms, I mean, you know that it's in another state, but do you draw
that's the blood draw limit you're talking about, right, Ben?
Yes, that would be correct. 5 nanograms per liter of body blood in your body, and that would have to be a blood test at this point. There's no other technology that does that.
I'm just wondering, did you talk to any lawyers or anyone who's in the scientific community that's ever, anyone other than a law enforcement who supported that as a per se amount that equates to, you know, what you're suggesting maybe like an alcohol level? You know, like, because I know of, and we just had this person on the show. There's a lot of studies that are out there, and, you know, we reviewed, you know, the arguments and the debates that were set in Colorado regarding the subject. Now, for me, you know, as someone who's lobbying in Lansing, you know, I've got to, you know, try to present an argument that is, you know, within the public mindset of being rational. And the rationale between the 5 nanogram limit is that, you know, if you are a heavy user, you're still going to have a couple nanograms in your system after you've smoked about 5 or 6 hours. But, you know, it's going to drop down to, you know, 3 or 2, even if you're a heavy, full-time smoker. When you smoke marijuana, the active nanograms in your body is about 100 nanograms, and it gradually dissipates over the course of 3 to 4 hours. And, you know, of course, 0.08, some people would say that 0.08 is too high, or some people would say it's too low, but you got to set standards somewhere. And the standards that are out there. Stop, Chet. Ben, let me just ask you something. You know, I've had this situation in many, many cases, and I think the explanation is that it isn't 3 hours over a period of time. The graph shows a sharp spike upward, the last inhalation of smoke, and after 10 minutes in and around that area, there's a sharp decline down. It's not a gradual out, and you know, the graph is not a gradual up and decline. It is a sharp decline, and then it remains at a level that is, you know, therapeutic, medicinal, you know, and people that regularly smoke are always going to be at those levels, and those levels are always going to be determined by multiple factors of weight, you know, regularity of use. I mean, anyone that ingests...
That's correct. You know, in a courtroom setting, if you're a medical marijuana patient, I'm talking about, like, just non-medical patients, all right? You know, everyone should be able to have some amount in their system.
But here's the thing. Isn't it better to not... First of all, I thought the debate originally was just about whether these tests are accurate and you know, reliability and accuracy.
Right, exactly.
Second of all, you know, isn't it better to, when you're talking about creating laws that citizens are going to have to deal with, that you rely on, like, honest facts, you know, facts that we can observe and understand. For example, when you create these per se concepts, you know, whether they are true or not, because I don't believe at all that 5 nanograms affects. I mean, there. You know, I just think that, you know, in fact, one of the studies Marilyn Hoistis that our previous caller acknowledges want to be in the foremost. She says that 10 nanograms, at a minimum, 10 nanograms inconclusive, and those are circumstances where people are tested, you know, in perfect environments. You know, there's multiple factors that go into those moments before that affect a person's level of THC. But even moving on beyond that, you know, the Michigan Supreme Court, for example, you know, for at least patients said, you know what, it's not just it's just not any presence. You've got to prove impairment. Why wouldn't we want, you know, the same thing for marijuana? If you're going to suspect the marijuana, you know, make them
the best policy.
Right. I mean, let them prove by videotaping, walking a line, let them, you know, or doing some dexterity tests, because there's a huge difference, like the effects of alcohol on the central nervous system and a person's ability to actually function and, you know, motor skills is substantially different and affects differently for cannabis. And I think that many of the testing protocol, as our previous caller, field sobriety testing, National Highway Safety Field Sobriety, there's only like 2 or 3 recognized, standardized testing. And they don't, I don't think people, if they're injured and they can't do it because they're a patient, but even, for recreational use. And that's the point of it. I mean, people shouldn't be punished because of what they have in their bloodstream when they're in a vehicle. They should be punished if they're driving badly. And I think that, I just think it's a better policy and really does take into consideration these concepts, because otherwise, I mean, that's what the current existing law is for all the other prescription medications. I don't know.
It's parroting the other substances that are equivalent.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ben. Go ahead.
Mike, I agree with you. I stand corrected. It is a sharp decline. It pans out a little bit towards the drop, but it goes from 100 down to about 2 in about 3 to 4 hours in general. Now, I agree with you. This science is very new. It's relative. There's a lot of different issues that go into that fact. But me personally, I would rather see, if this bill is going to move forward and we can't stop it, we've got to try to mitigate it as much as possible. And I would rather, everyone in the state of Michigan be able to have on the books, a small amount of THC in their system, because, that kind of, negates the concept that any trace amount of THC in your system, could constitute a problem. It's something better than nothing, I guess.
Would you agree with me, from what you know and your observations of the world and your travels and whatnot, if someone, do you think the distinction of having 10 nanograms or 8 nanograms or 7 nanograms or 6 nanograms or 5 nanograms is impair someone's ability to...
Behavior-based detection system.
Yeah, to determine a person's, ability to drive. I'm just saying it's junk science. The new thing that the law enforcement community's been doing, and I'm surprised that they even need these tests. They've been paying money to get, investigators, traffic patrol people certified in DRE, drug recognition expertise.
Yep.
There's 2 classes that are offered, and they can look at you and look in your eyes and smell you and touch your hair and make you do all kinds of weird exercises and then determine what drug you're taking, under the pretext that a super quality trained police officer that comes in and gets certified,
drug recognition expert,
will carry the day better than any science. Forget the blood and the Anyways, that's for another day.
I think at the hearing too.
All right, let's talk about this other.
I'd rather have that than a per se limit.
Right, just as a matter of course. But anyways, let's move on to this other important topic. I know that you've been interacting, or it's been you've mentioned that you've been interacting with the Michigan State Police on the issue of the provisioning centers. What can you tell us about those interactions?
Yeah, that's correct. We brokered a meeting with MSP on Monday of this week. Cannabis Stakeholders Group at the beginning of the year retained GCSI, one of the top lobbying firms in Lansing, multi-client lobbying firms, and they were able to broker this deal to meet with us and discuss their issues. And we met at the GSI headquarters, and we invited the sponsor of the bill's staff, Nick, to come out, and Robin Schneider and Kevin McKinney from the NPRA. And we met with Amy from the Michigan State Police, who is their legislative representative, and she went over with us her concerns about the bill. Most of them was about some of the definitions between the provisioning center bill and the concentrate bill, and making sure that they matched, the language matched. And she gave us a list of corrections that they thought that they needed to be made, but she made it a point of letting us know that the state police is never going to be in favor of this bill. But if these changes are made, then they believe that it can be enforceable. And if the Michigan State Police says it's enforceable, that's enough to move it forward. So we're going to be trying to get those adjustments made. I don't think that any of them make any significant changes in the bill from how it's enacted. It's just language stuff. So
well, I'm curious.
I thought it was a very positive meeting.
I'm curious to know, just in terms of where they would, take issue at all. How critically they would read it, and where they think changes would need to be made. I'm fascinated to know where they're focused.
One of their biggest concerns is, making sure that there's going to be checks and balances, and the networks are going to be established to promote illegal activity. So that's their fundamental concern. They don't want to see, marijuana grown for medical purposes, and then, that same marijuana end up on the streets or out of state. So that's their fundamental concern. And a lot of those issues are already addressed in the bill, and they had some concerns about, packaging and labeling so that law enforcement officers understood, the equivalence with edibles and concentrated forms. So we talked about that a little bit. They might want to see the language tightened up so that, because right now for the concentrates, for the edibles, it's a 16-to-1 ratio. 16 units of weight of edibles equals, 1 unit of flour. And, so law enforcement officers, they want it so that law enforcement officers aren't confused trying to put brownies on a scale, trying to figure out whether or not a patient is, over their limit. So they just want to make it enforceable so that it's practical for them. And they're never going to go forward and say, yes, we support this bill, but they'll say, yes, we can enforce the rules that are implied here, and that's all we need from them.
The first point you brought up of their concern, and I know from a lawyer's perspective, I always imagined, when we get before the Michigan Supreme Court on the Carruthers edible issue, and it may not happen if this bill passes. Probably may not be needed. But if I was there, one of the justices would say, Mr. Komorn, stop arguing with the prosecutor and give us, a workable solution to this dilemma. We're really struggling with what would the, solution. What solution you would suggest for us? Don't be adversarial. Put yourself in a objective situation and provide us the answer that's workable for everybody. You know what I mean? And I understand that that's sometimes the situation that people find themselves in, because you're really trying to, you have to recognize the other side, and I realize that. But, the suggestion that they're trying to prevent illegal activity is, it's like the federal government's main issue, too, that it's not being funneled to, patients or, and I think that's something that, is that ever not going to be a concern unless, something dramatically changes? I'm just saying, what could be an answer to them? Is there like a conscientious task list of assurances or changes to a law that would say to them, I could think of them. I could put myself in Bill Schuette's position, and I could, think as I would from him, and come up with some really, really, serious things that would probably make it certain that it's not going anywhere other than to, the limited patients that the law would allow. Is that what we're talking about? Is a solution that's going to be, retorted back to the, or suggested changes, or where does that? Where does the conversation go from there? That's what I guess I'm asking.
Well, it's kind of like a hot potato, whether it's the health department or the Michigan State Police or the Sheriff's Association, they don't want to come up with the fixes. They really don't want to weigh in too much because politically it's a hot potato. They're afraid to say something positive or negative, because if they say something positive, they might, it might create animosity. If they say something, on why it can't work, then, it could be negative. So it's kind of like a hot potato. They handle the issue very guarded. They keep their cards very close to their chest, and they try to stay, as objectively neutral as possible. As far as developing solutions, they're really, not really, trying to help with that. The one thing that they said is a lot of these, a lot of the concerns have already been worked out in the work group. We do have some negotiated solutions that have already been established in the bill when it was in the House. Now it's just a matter of, addressing some of their small concerns that they had, and then, getting all of those changes and presenting them to Richardville because, at this point, I think that, there's not a lot of desire to be cooperative. And that, that kind of makes me disappointed because I was under the impression, as we were leaving the end of last year, that people felt pretty confident this was going to get done quickly, and I knew that it was going to be challenging, and at this point, we're really, really going to have to continue to, work in a grassroots effort to get patients to remind their senators how important this legislation is to pass, because unless there's pressure from, the community to push these bills forward, they're not going to try to come up with those solutions because it's an election year. They don't want to do anything controversial.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the discussion about satisfying the state police's concerns of policing dispensaries the wrong discussion to be having? I mean, isn't the mere fact that we are theoretically legislating a state law that says these things are allowed and we're going to let them be determined at the local level, doesn't that by definition say, hey, the state police are kind of out of it. We're going to make this law and it's a local issue. In fact, it's actually like a statement to a certain degree of, state police really shouldn't be getting involved with these dispensaries at all. Shouldn't really have much concerns once the law is passed.
Right. The municipality should be alerting the police if there's an issue.
Well, they should be regulating it as they will with their local ordinance. And if it gets beyond that and some kind of crazy stuff happens and they get complaints beyond that, then maybe they, but it's not for them anymore to really be involved. I'm just wondering if that's part of the debate. But you got 30 seconds to answer Jamie's waving. We got to go to Robin next. But please,
well,
Ben,
listen, I'm here with C.C. Taylor right now, and it's been a great hard week, and there's a lot of gray area out there, but we're going to continue to work Lansing, and I think we're making progress. The more resources that we're putting into Lansing with strong lobbying effort, the more productive that we're being, and I think today was a really good example of teamwork on all people's parts. Putting differences aside and putting patients' rights first. Everyone, hey, Constance, say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Glad you're free.
Hey, Constance.
Thanks for calling in.
No
yes.
problem. Thanks, guys. I appreciate all of the support. It means a lot to me. Ben was reading me a lot of the comments while I was in there, and the support today is literally, overwhelming. It was amazing, and it was really hard not to smile walking into the courtroom and seeing all of those familiar faces there fighting for the same thing. And this fight isn't over with, but I'm glad to fight it, and it makes it a lot easier with everybody else behind me supporting me. And thank you guys once again.
All right.
Cool. What a great statement.
Thanks for calling in, and have a great night. We'll talk to you guys real soon. Take care.
Take care. Plant green trees. What?
I hope we got that for the